the lovely Natalie Jackson. Hello. So Natalie's going to talk to us about the gender sport gap at primary school, which I've got my pen ready because this is like a pet project of mine. So I can't wait to hear what Natalie's got to say. So I'm going to say, just simply going to say, welcome, Natalie. I'll hand over to you. You can kind of tell everybody what wonderful work you're doing, and we can hear all about your expertise within the gender sport gap at primary school. So welcome.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? Brilliant. Can you see my slides?
They're coming up. Yeah, they should be live now. Yeah. Yes, they are.
Lovely. So I've called my talk today Running Like a Girl, and then the subheading the gender sport gap at primary school. And I hope I'm going to give you some things to think about today. I'm hopefully you're already thinking about them, but if not, this is kind of a starting point for what you might want to think about. So I'm going to go through a few things around the gender sport gap. I'm hoping we can talk some stats, but not too much because I realise it's late in the day. And as I say, yeah, I just want to give you something to think about. So my name's Natalie Jackson. I'm one of 3 directors of a company called Totally Runnable. We're a social enterprise company and we are based in the north of England, and we work with schools all across the north of England really to help them measure and close the gender sport gap. We particularly focus on primary schools, but we do some work with the lower end of secondary school, but primary schools is our main focus. And that picture there is me on the left hand side as you look at it, and my 2 co-directors. So part of the reason we're called Totally Runnable is because my 2 co-directors, if you're an athletics fan, you might recognise them. They are Jenny Meadows and Emily Freeman. So Jenny was an 800-metre runner. She's since retired and has just become a new mummy. She's just had baby Arabella in January. And Emily was a 200-metre runner. So the 2 of them are absolute elite athletes who've since done coaching, personal training and that sort of thing. I, as a child, was the complete opposite of an elite athlete. I think at primary school, I'm sure we did some sport, and I remember playing some netball, but I don't remember doing a massive amount of sport, and I certainly didn't think of myself as particularly sporty. I took up running in my late 20s, so I'm getting on for 10 years ago now, and I found that through taking up running, I could do a lot more than I thought I could. And we work now with girls, with boys, with primary staff in particular. And the big thing that I always hear back is, do you know, I can do more than I think I can. So a lot of the work that we do is using running as the tool to help people see that they can do more than they think they can. So that's why we're called Totally Runnable. Today's session, we're going to have a bit of an introduction to the gender sport gap, what that means, the work that Totally Runnable does, give you some statistics around what we see in the work that we do, and with a particular focus on the gender gap in primary school sport, and leave you something to think about, leave you some really practical tools where if at the moment you're thinking, well, I don't know if we've got a gender sport gap in my school, or how would I even go about thinking about that, I'm going to give you some really practical tips about the first sort of things you can do. So the first question is, what's the gender sport gap? What do I mean when I say the gender sport gap? And we define that, and this is an iterative definition. You know, it keeps, as we go along, we refine and we define what we mean, but it's essentially any difference between those identifying as girls and those identifying as boys in participation, confidence or performance in primary school PE, sport and physical activity. It's as simple as that. What we know, particularly at primary school, what the science tells us is that physically there should be no difference between performance, skill level, performance sort of capability between girls and boys. There isn't a physical difference between girls and boys at that age. Post-puberty, there are a lot more questions about it, and certainly strength becomes an issue there. But at primary school age, if anything, the only difference is that girls will often have a growth spurt at year 5 and 6 that boys don't have till year 7 and 8 on average, which means that by the end of primary school, girls in theory should be bigger and stronger than boys, and potentially should therefore be able to run further in a given time. But as you'll see in a minute, that's not necessarily always the case. But practically, what does that mean then? What's a gender sport gap? So the first slide that I've got here, it seems to be jumping around, but the first slide that I've got here is some research that we did in 2017, and it was a project that we called Don't Be a Girl About It. And that has specific connotations, and again we'll come back to that in a second with the title of today's session. But what we saw in that, so that research was looking across 4 primary schools. We had about 350 Key Stage 2 children, and we surveyed them, we did focus groups, we did individual interviews, we worked intensively with particular groups around seeing what is the difference. Is there a difference between girls and boys when we ask across that wide group in terms of confidence and performance, participation in physical activity? And the big thing that we found was the first question that we asked. So we had some surveys that asked, how sporty are you? The first question was, how sporty are you? And what we found was that although between 80 and 90% of all Key Stage 2 children said that they were one of these answers, quite sporty or very sporty, when we split the genders by what children identified themselves as being, boys would say they were very sporty and girls would say they were quite sporty. And we could see that even by year 3, girls were 22% less likely to call themselves very sporty than year 3 boys. And that isn't something that is inherent in them, that isn't something that's physical, that is something that is socialized. So part of this, we had looked at some government research, and the government research had found that girls begin to doubt their sporting ability from as young as age 7, from year 3. And we looked at that and we did our own version of the research to see, could we see that on a larger scale? They hadn't spoken to many girls to do the government research, but we looked at it on a larger scale. So that was an interesting starting point for us. If you're interested, we have a full report about it. So it's a full lengthy report, and it's on our website. I'll send you across the link, and you can put that in the sort of notes afterwards. But this in particular, I don't expect you to be able to read all the tiny print, but in particular, the graphics here I think are interesting. So we also ask questions like, who's more confident at sport, girls, boys, or they're equal? We asked, if you just look there on the left hand side, the top 2 sections of blue, that was the responses, what girls said and what boys said in response to who is more confident about sport. And what we found was that although girls were, the answers were kind of equally, most of them said they were equal, and a similar number said boys are more confident to girls. When we asked the boys, nobody said girls were more confident. So there was 2% or something in that one. And 49 and 49 said equal and boys are more confident. And what we didn't expect, but that was repeated across who is more confident, who is better at sport, and who plays more sport, is that we had very different answers from the girls and from the boys. So that's another interesting angle to this. What's going on? What are they saying? And you'll see from the bottom right there what Key Stage 2 boys and what Key Stage 2 girls were saying. Despite all the work that we do, I guess, in terms of telling particularly girls you can be who you want to be and you can do anything you want to do, actually when we asked them whether or not being a boy or a girl makes a difference to the sports you can play, we still had a third of boys and girls saying that, yeah, it made a difference. What we see in the work that we do, so quite often we have a sort of collaborative review tool that we work with schools, and we come in and we do an exercise where it's all very positive, and we call it a challenge run. It's very positive, but essentially they are running for either 10 minutes at Key Stage 1 or 15 minutes at Key Stage 2, and we ask them all to do a challenge. It's a challenge. We're going to see how far we can go as a team, but actually what we're doing in the background is tallying up what's going on. So we have a look there at whether there are any gaps at any particular year group in how far people are running, whether it's gender, pupil premium, SEND, anything like that. Excuse me. And this is a gathering together of the last full year we had pre-COVID. So what we see here is about 6,000 children at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And the 2 lines there show how far the children were running in either 10 or 15 minutes. So you can see there that despite there being no physical reason why this should be the case, boys were outperforming girls by an average across the board of 166 meters over between 10 and 15 minutes. And there was no real narrowing of the gap once you get to year 5 and year 6, which you might expect to see based on the physicality. The final point really to mention on the statistics in our research is that if you do want to have a look at that Don't Be a Girl About It report, we had 3 tips, 3 sort of recommendations off the back of that report, and some of those I will pull into my tips for you today. But we recommended culture change in schools to normalise physical activity for all, irrespective of gender, and that includes both the messages that are being sent. So some of our training, we do some staff training around actually how are you maybe contributing to these messages. If you need an an example of somebody who's a footballer, would you automatically use a male footballer on your PowerPoint because that's what you think might engage the boys in the class? Actually, are we questioning, are we using messages where you might not necessarily think about it? One thing that we are told often by girls is that there's not enough books in school about sporty girls. And of course, that's, I think, because there's the stereotype about the boys not wanting to read as much, and so sometimes people are getting books about sporty boys, but then girls are just seeing that message over and again. So another point was further research into the impact of gender on PE, sport and physical activity, and we've done some more research, but certainly I would welcome and support anybody else doing further research on this sort of thing. And short-term projects working to increase girls' confidence in PE, sport and physical activity. You know, we tested the work that we do, and we know that it works. We can absolutely change how confident a girl feels about her own physical ability and who she feels she is in a 6-week course in an hour and a half. But actually, they need those messages. They need more in terms of building their confidence to overcome the stereotypes that they are seeing, whether it's in the media, whether it's in other places. So what we knew pre-COVID, there's obviously a lot of research going on now, and certainly we'll be feeding into that. But this was the picture across the gender sport gap really before COVID. So we had that Government Equalities Office research that said girls begin to doubt their sporting ability age 7, backed up by our research that by year 3, girls are 22% less likely to call themselves very sporty than boys. We had some other research from things like the Active Live survey, This Girl Can, and Girl Guiding. So Girl Guiding found that the biggest fall in participation occurs after the transition to secondary school. That's exactly what we see in the secondaries that we work with. They're still saying that by the end of year 8, there's kind of a drop off in terms of a lot of girls and their confidence in sport. We know that from the Active Live survey, from age 5, boys are more active than girls at every age. And anecdotally, you know, personally, my little girl's not even 3 yet. She, in normal times, she was going to a toddler football class, and there was a massive stereotypical divide between how many girls were and how many boys in each class. It's a brilliant class. They don't actively advertise towards boys, but actually in a toddler football class, there was my daughter and my niece were the only girls in our class of 10 or 15 children. There's 10 or 15 in the next door class, and you don't see any girls. And the 2 classes that come after ours, you don't see any girls either. So interesting what's going on. Whereas we took her to a ballet class, and there was a stereotypical shift the other direction. I think there was only 1 boy in the class, and I only saw him 1 week out of the few months that we were going. But actually the physicality of what they were doing in the ballet class, there was a lot of sitting still. And actually each individual child, there might be 20 children, each individual child had to come up, do something and go and sit down again. Whereas actually in the football class, it's active, it's physical. So is there a difference in what's going on there across the board? That's obviously anecdotally what I've experienced. But what we know is that 75% of women and girls have told This Girl Can that they want to be more physically active, but they fear judgment. And that has to have an impact in an industry where we have 85% of primary teachers are female. So even accounting for the fact that there must be some male primary teachers who want to be more physically active but fear judgment, we've got 2/3 of primary teachers at least who want to be more physically active but fear judgment in their own lives. And that's a tricky space to then throw in 6 hours of PE training on the average PGCE and expect us all to deliver, you know, brilliant, confident PE. We know that from the Active Lives Children and Young People survey, only 43% of girls were hitting recommended activity levels compared to 51% of boys. And that ties in, I guess, with our findings that boys would run an average of 166 meters further than girls in our fitness benchmarking. And we know that there's external things going on in the media. So we're going to come in a second to what's going on in the media. But 2.9% of photos of sport in newspapers show women playing sport. But what we were finding was that pre-COVID, the Sporting and Active Live survey from April 2020, which dealt with the preceding year, that was showing that for adults, the gap was closing. So certainly in the sense of role modelling, in the sense of children seeing parents being active, the gap was closing. So that was definitely a positive. Oh, I've pressed my screen, but it's not doing anything yet. Try again. Oh, there we are. So messages about gender. I guess my first question to you is where might girls or boys receive messages about gender and what a particular gender might mean? And I've put together some of the common answers that we get from that. So sometimes it's family stereotypes, sometimes it's the media, Sometimes, in fact, often it's marketing. So whether that's toys, if you go in again, in normal times, if you go in a toy shop, there are very definite, often girl aisles and boy aisles. And even where they aren't labelled, there's a brilliant campaign called Let Toys Be Toys. And they campaigned for toy shops to take away the girl and boy aisles. But even if you take those away, if you put all of the stereotypically boy toys in one area and stereotypically girl toys in another, children are socialized really early to know what that means. We know that from peers, there's a lot of messages within peers and what's going on. And we know from school, obviously, girls and boys are receiving messages either officially or unofficially about what gender might mean. I was speaking to a head teacher not so long ago who was saying that actually if children in any other way were dividing themselves up, if children were dividing themselves up based on the colour of their skin, lining up to go into lunch, we would never accept that. But actually, we quite readily accept girls and boys dividing themselves up into girls and boys and playing exclusively with other girls, or playing exclusively with other boys, or sitting at lunch with just boys, or sitting at lunch with just girls. Is that something that actually school is accidentally reinforcing by not questioning? We know the importance of role models from the work that we do. Oh, my slides are jumping. We run some workshops, and I've pulled out two particular things from the workshops that I think are relevant to role modelling. So we know that in the Boys Fairness workshop that we do, so we started doing girls and sport workshops about 5 years ago, and we were exclusively doing those and not working with the boys. And part of my answer to schools about that was saying, actually, the boys need to see the girls doing something sporty. It's important for them to see that. It sends a message. But actually, it was leaving the boys out, and we were finding that we were ending up sending the girls back out into the world. So we talked with them about it was particularly aimed at year 5 and 6, and we talked with them about the ways in which negative messages are sent to girls, particularly about sport. And we talked about the number of coaches, and we talked about sport in the media and things like that. By the end of that session, they talk about, are they happy with things the way they are? Well, no, and neither are we. But now we've brought them into the light. What are we going to do about them? If you aren't happy with something but you don't do anything about it, what happens? Well, it doesn't get any better. It might even get worse. So, okay, what are we going to do about it? So we end that session with the girls where they go out into the world absolutely buzzing about all the ways that they can change the world. So they've not only learned that if you're not happy about something, you can change it, but they've learned that actually these messages that they're getting don't have to be internalized, and they don't have to be who they choose to be. So, but we were finding that the girls were going out into the world and we're hitting this brick wall, particularly in the playground with the football, I think, in a lot of cases, where boys were saying, whoa, 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 what's going on here? And it was it was creating a fault line, if you like. So we started doing some sessions with boys, because none of this is boys' fault. None of this is anybody's fault in the sense that one person has decided to do something. Girls, I think, were finding within the sessions that they were saying, well, the boys say this, and well, the boys say that, and men do this. And I'm the first one to say, look, this isn't something to blame boys about. Boys are just growing up in the same world that we are, seeing all the same messages that we are. So we started doing these Boys Fairness workshops, and at the start of the workshop we asked them to name, and they don't know what the session's about. They think it's about a made-up world where half the people have got green hair and half the people have got purple hair, and we all live together and work together, but people don't treat purple-haired people and green-haired people the same when it comes to sport. And the start of the session begins before they've even thought about any of that. We have them in teams. We have a purple team and a green team, and they have to name as many sports people as they can in 5 minutes. And we regularly get rooms where they are naming 40 role models per table, 40 athletes per table, might have 4 tables, and they're naming 1 or 2 women. So you'll usually get, in fact, I can see on the screen, we've got a Jessica Ennis. So you'll usually get Jessica Ennis, and you'll usually get Serena Williams. Other than that, boys in particular aren't naming female role models, which is an interesting thing. We also know from the girls' sessions that they are so passionate about role models and talking about role models, they will always name the 1 or 2 sporty girls and say that they've inspired them. So we know how important they are. I alluded to it earlier, but we had some research in 2018 where we counted photos of sport in the newspapers for a year. And we found not only that it was 2.9% of photos of somebody playing sport showed women, but we found that, as you can see in that picture, we would see pictures of men and women very differently when it came to sports people. We would often see, as an example there, we would see the men running the relay, trying hard, sweating, looking like they're trying. And our best 4 female athletes in the country are leaping in the air with a flag behind them. we would see Andy Murray hitting the tennis ball. We would see Johanna Konta turning, smiling to the camera. We were seeing male and female athletes very differently. Some statistics on there, I'll just pull out the worst day we had. One photo of a woman across the 9 national newspapers and 365 photos of men. So we started something called C Sporty, B Sporty, and our role models project for this year is something that you guys can all get involved in. It's completely free to schools to join if you're a part of our Girls in Sport pledge, which is also completely free to join. But we essentially have taken 7 awesome real life girls aged 11 to 16 and put them on posters doing the sports that they love. This is hot off the press today. This is literally launched this morning. I am on local BBC News this evening at a school launching it. So these posters come with resources for your assembly and class resources. We've done a podcast series of the podcast that we do called C Sporty, B Sporty, where we're talking to some amazing adult female role models. The first one was out last week and it was Hannah Cockcroft, 12 times world champion wheelchair racer. So it was really interesting to listen to Elizabeth saying there, because we have included a wheelchair athlete in our posters. But yeah, interesting to hear her comments there, and certainly something to think on the diversity. But if role models or role modelling is something that you are thinking might be important, particularly to girls, but also to boys in your school, absolutely get a hold of these. We're funding these because we know how important role models are. The Girls in Sport pledge is something completely free for schools. It's something to say we're doing more for girls in sport because we know how important it is. So just on the left hand side, we're using the acrostic Sporty. These are completely free resources. Please take advantage of them. These are for schools like you who are thinking, what can we do in more for girls in sport? The 3 quickest wins for your school before I finish is measure your gender sport gap. I don't care how you do that. If we can help support you to do that, brilliant. But just look at it. Is there a gap? Is there a difference in confidence, participation, or skill level in terms of girls and boys in your school? If there isn't, get in touch. I would love to hear what you're doing, because you are doing something that doesn't happen naturally, in my experience. Normalise physical activity for everyone, including staff. But do that sensitively and with support. Don't expect your staff to all be super confident about sport, whether they're male or female. Do that with support. And sign up for the Girls in Sport pledge. If you want the free role models posters, you need to be quick because we are sending them out in the next week. So sign up now, but it's completely free. And bonus number 4, subscribe to our C Sporty, B Sporty podcast. Again, totally free, but it's talking about all of these issues and just helping you think more about this kind of thing. That's me there, my contact details. I am always happy for people to get in touch, always happy to give advice and have a chat about what you see, whether you see a gap, whether you don't see a gap, in particular if you don't see a gap, because I would love to know what you're doing, and shout from the rooftops about it.
Oh, I cannot tell you how much that presentation just sang to my heart. Yeah, I don't know whether you can see over my shoulder, Natalie, whether you can see backstage that big pile of trophies there.
I can.
I'm living vicariously through my daughter, who is a runner. So I was like writing everything out. It's amazing. I can't believe, well, I can believe it, but it was just absolutely stunning. That, just tell me again the exact figure. It's one picture of a woman participating in sport versus, was it 365?
Yeah, that was the worst day we had. So we didn't do every day for the whole year. We did one day a month for a year, and the worst day, we had one picture of a woman, and it was small as well. It wasn't even big. And we had 365 pictures across the 9 newspapers. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so for schools to really start to counteract that and turn the tide, I know you gave that list of quick wins. So just, if you're a PE lead in your school and you walk in tomorrow and you want to start challenging this, where would they need to start? What would the first thing that you would say for them to do?
So the Girls in Sport pledge is answering exactly that question. So the Girls in Sport pledge, in normal times when we haven't got the posters are like an added bonus right now. The Girls in Sport pledge is about all of the ways that we see, and it uses that acrostic Sporty. So S is for stereotypes, P is for photos. So for example, photos. We often go into schools and we see a load of beautiful photos on the wall in reception. And the amount of times you look at those and the girls are doing arts and crafts and the boys are doing football. They are beautiful photos, but actually they are very stereotypical what's going on in the photos. And it's things like that. It's like death by 10,000 pinpricks. If you see that one day, if you're a year 5 girl or a year for boy or whatever. You see that one day, it's not a big deal. You see that everywhere you look, you internalize that message and you start to believe that that's what I do because I'm a girl. I'm a girl, therefore it means that. And I can see it in my daughter Lexi. You know, she's doing it already. She's not even 3. And you've got to keep catching that message. She's not immune to it because she's growing up in my house, and I'm so aware of it. I've got to keep hitting that message with her. They learn really quickly. I remember my best friend's little girl. She was not even 3, wasn't stringing whole sentences together, and we were playing with some Lego, and I'm building a football pitch because football's I like watching football. I'm a big football fan, and I said, "Oh, Elsie, pass me those people." You can tell she was just passing me people while I was playing. And I put people on the football pitch, and she took one of them off and said, "Girls don't do football." And her mum was there, and her mum said, "I've absolutely no idea where she's got that from. She's picked that up from somewhere." But really easily, you give her, you say, "Oh no, I need it back. Girls do football. You know, I'm a football coach," and she says, "Oh, okay." So, but you've got to keep catching that because she's getting those messages somewhere. So the Girls in Sport Pledge is all of the super common places that schools might be accidentally sending that message. Stereotypes. Are we splitting girls and boys up? If we need to split a class up, are we using that age-old thing of girls over there, boys over there, and that's how you split your class? But the second you do that, you send the message that that's a difference. That's a difference that we use for a reason. So it becomes a thing then. So the Girls in Sport Pledge is about all the ways. Events. So we talk about occasions. That in sporty, it's occasions, and we talk about, do you do something for the World Cup? And while we're on it, why are we calling it the World Cup? Why aren't we calling it the Men's World Cup? Do you do something for the World Cup at school? Well, in which case, are you then going to the next year do something for the Women's World Cup? And the number of schools where I've said that, and I've just sort of, and I'm tongue in cheek about it. Well, what about the Women's World Cup? Oh no, we did the World Cup last year. that become that if you're only ever celebrating the men's sporting events, you make that, and we can't blame schools for that. I certainly don't. You know, one of our company values is being supportive, so I would never blame schools for that. I think it's something that I mean, the FA and FIFA do it. We have the World Cup and the Women's World Cup. We have the FA Cup and the Women's FA Cup. We turn the men's version into the default. So there's a lot of ways, you know, in a school. My sister is a primary head teacher, so I know how much goes on in a school, and I fully expect none of this to be intentional, but there are a lot of ways that within schools we send these messages that actually we've internalized, we don't even notice. So the starting point, in answer to your question, it's a very long-winded answer, is Girls in Sport Pledge. It'll tell you some of the really obvious ways, and some of which you might be grateful that you're not doing and think, "Whew, thank goodness we're not doing that." But other ways might be ways that you just think, "Oh, we do that," and actually it's about turning the tide on these messages.
Well, you've just completely kind of blown me out, blow my mind really, because I was thinking, oh yeah, we used to, when I was in headship, we did loads of sports stuff, but just you saying, you know, we did the World Cup, we didn't do the Women's World Cup. And I would say I was a really proud advocate of women in sport, and it never occurred to me. So I think it's so important to constantly revisit all those little tiny messages. And it goes back to what Alistair was saying at the beginning when he said about the Channel 4 branding around the Paralympics, when they said to the Olympics, "Thanks for the warm-up." And it's a bit like with the Women's World Cup, like, "Thanks for the warm-up."
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a really, really useful. I can imagine lots of schools looking at that toolkit and thinking, we think we do a really great job of this, but actually it had never occurred to me about that particular thing, because like you say, the job that we do is so busy and so manic that you might not necessarily realise that there are some things that you're doing unintentionally. So that toolkit would definitely be something that I would be looking at. But that PowerPoint and that presentation just sang to me. So thank you so much, Natalie. It's been an absolute delight. You've got all your contact details up there. I can imagine lots of colleagues wanting to get in touch with you to find out more about this, and especially to get your posters as well. So thank you for your time this afternoon, and good luck with your BBC interview later on.
I will send you across all of the notes and things. I'll send you the link to sign up to the Girls in Sport Pledge, and I'll send you the link to the research, so anyone who's interested can have a look. But we're on social media, we're everywhere at Totally Runnable.
That's absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much, Natalie. Thanks for joining us. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.